Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. And now the Friday Crime Report. April 1st, 2024, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 4:15 p.m. Sade Robinson was a 19-year-old young woman who seemed to have a bright future ahead of her. She was a criminal justice student at Milwaukee Area Technical College. On the afternoon of April 1st, 2024, she told an employee at the apartment complex she stayed at that she was excited about a date that she had planned for later that night. After she got off work at the pizzeria that she worked at, she waved goodbye to her coworkers, and that would be the last time they would ever see her. When she met up with her date, the two of them started by meeting up at the Twisted Fisherman restaurant where the man said that he used to work. They had food and drinks at the bar, then they left and took Robinson's car to another bar, Duke's. A little before 9:30 p.m., the two of them arrived at the man's home on the 3100 block of South 39th Street. The two went inside, and that would mark the very last time anyone would ever see Sade Robinson alive. Sometime during the early morning hours of April 2nd, Cudahy City workers reported seeing someone who used a car to ram open a gate to a service road leading to the pump house at Warnemont Park. Police would recover a broken piece of a vehicle belonging to a Honda Civic. Later that morning, a 2020 Honda Civic was found on fire on the 1800 block of North 29th Street. A witness said they saw a white male wearing a hoodie exit the vehicle and toss a lighter into it before walking away. That afternoon, these mysterious events would take a turn for the horrifying. Around 5:30 p.m., someone reported having discovered a human leg belonging to a black woman at Warnemont Park. The Milwaukee Sheriff's Department said the leg was found about 2/3 of the way down a 100-foot bluff near the pump house. A few hours after that, one of Sade's friends reported her missing to the Milwaukee police after she failed to return phone calls and didn't show up for her shift at the pizzeria. The Milwaukee PD visited Sade's apartment and learned from staff that she had been last seen the day before and had been excited about her date. After seeing news reports of Robinson being missing, another of her friends told investigators that she tracked Robinson's whereabouts using the Life 360 app and that the last location for her had been Warnemont Park at 4:30 a.m. on April 2nd. Using data from cell phone towers, police were able to trace the movements of Sade's phone from the day she disappeared. On April 4th, police finally got around to pulling over the man who she had been on a date with, and they found a hoodie in his vehicle that matched the description of the hoodie worn by the person who torched the Honda Civic. The man's name? Maxwell Anderson. The 34-year-old would emerge as the suspect in this gruesome crime. Law enforcement executed a search warrant at Anderson's home. They found blood in one of the bedrooms and on the walls leading to the basement. Several gasoline containers were found. Detectives also found a knife in the kitchen sink and an axe hanging on the living room wall, as well as possible blood stains in Anderson's car on a door speaker. Over the next several weeks, more of Sade's body parts would continue to be discovered. Police found a human foot appearing to match the leg found in Cudahy. Other human flesh was also found in that area. On April 12, 2024, a week after his arrest, Anderson was charged with first-degree intentional homicide, mutilating a corpse, and arson in the death of Sade Robinson. But the horror didn't stop just because the suspected killer had been charged. Because days later, on April 18th, the sheriff's office said a torso and arm believed to belong to Miss Robinson was found in a remote stretch of beach in South Milwaukee. And over 3 weeks after that, an arm believed to belong to Sade was found washed up on a beach in Waukegan, Illinois. The family of Sade Robinson sued Maxwell Anderson for wrongful death. Police would eventually discover what they called a confidential informant who would give them details about how they believed the crime was committed.
A friend of Anderson's is now a confidential informant in the case. He told police that Anderson showed him a room in his basement where he planned to kill Sade. The informant told police that Anderson planned on shooting Robinson and then dismembering her body in the room before disposing of her body throughout the city.
Anderson's trial would eventually be scheduled for May of 2025. Last week on June 5th, both the prosecution and the defense rested their cases and the jury began deliberation. The very next day, they delivered their verdict.
As to count 1, the verdict reads, "We, the jury, find the defendant, Maxwell Anderson, guilty of first-degree intentional homicide as charged in count 1 of the information." As to count 2, we, the jury, find the defendant, Maxwell Anderson, guilty of mutilating a corpse as charged in count 2 of the information. As to count 3, We, the jury, find the defendant, Maxwell Anderson, guilty of arson of property other than a building as charged in count 3 of the information. As to count 4, we, the jury, find the defendant, Maxwell Anderson, guilty of hiding a corpse as charged in count 4 of the information.
Guilty on all counts. He hasn't been sentenced and won't be for several weeks at least. Wisconsin doesn't have the death penalty, so Anderson's facing a life sentence at most. Though racial immunity from law being what it is, there's always a good chance the judge might decide to give him a lighter sentence. And why not? That's exactly what this animal has enjoyed his entire life, because you won't be surprised to learn this isn't the first time that Maxwell Anderson's had a scrape with the law. This monster has an extensive criminal record, including convictions of disorderly conduct and domestic violence. All of them misdemeanors, by the way, when they should have been far more severe. In 2014, Anderson was charged with 2 counts of misdemeanor disorderly conduct, stemming from an incident where a relative told the Waukesha County Sheriff's deputies that he had shoved her, smashed a cell phone, and broke items in the kitchen, according to the criminal complaint. When confronted by a deputy, Anderson reportedly said, "What are you going to do, shoot me?" Well, he knew that his racial privilege would protect him from any police violence. He then ran into the garage and fled in the woman's car. He later returned, crashed the woman's car into a deck, and eventually was arrested. Of course, because of the fact that he wasn't black, he was arrested without being shot. The woman told investigators she believed Anderson was under the influence of drugs or alcohol. He was allowed to plead guilty in that case. In 2015, at another relative's home in Door County, Anderson was arrested after smashing a glass, punching a hole in a wall, and grabbing a phone out of another relative's hand who was trying to call police. A relative suggested that he seek mental health treatment. In 2019, he was accused of beating a stranger who tried to intervene when he saw Anderson and a woman arguing. A recording of the assault by a witness showed Anderson on top of the man, punching him multiple times before dragging him to the ground. Anderson admitted to hitting the man and was allowed to plead guilty to a misdemeanor disorderly conduct charge and was sentenced to 1 year of probation and 25 hours of community service. He was also ordered to pay $7,000 in restitution to the victim for medical bills and lost wages. So the beating that he gave the guy was pretty severe. The police didn't shoot this guy when they had the chance, even when he confronted them and peeled off in a relative's car. He beats people in the streets, and every single time he isn't charged with a felony. It's always a misdemeanor. That's not an accident. People from the dominant society always say the system failed, but black people know all too well that's not true. The system worked exactly the way it was designed to. The injustice system is deliberately designed and executed in a way that every charge has a felony version and a misdemeanor version for the exact same act. For example, if you're black and you beat up a stranger on the street, you get charged with felony assault. But if you're the Maxwell Andersons of the world, or anyone who's non-black for that matter, then you get charged with misdemeanor disorderly conduct. Same act, but depending on your color, different charges. That's how creeps like this remain on the loose. This is the entire reason I began doing my crime reports. But there's also one other aspect of this case that isn't getting the attention it should. While searching Anderson's house, police also found a Crown Royal bag containing an ID belonging to a 27-year-old woman and a notebook with other women's names and information about them inside of it. They also found women's clothing hidden between basement support beams and in the foundation wall. The evidence seems overwhelming that Sade Robinson was not Maxwell Anderson's only victim. In all likelihood, this guy is a serial killer. Yet how much effort has been put out to investigate whom else he may have lured into that death trap he called his home? Regardless of how Sade Robinson came to be in the company of this Anderson degenerate, or their going back to his place after their night on the town, that doesn't erase the fact that she didn't deserve to be butchered to death. And her family will never know peace as a result of this. It's one thing if she had been killed, but to have been killed in such a heinous manner, well, the only thing a family can ever think about is, what were the last moments of their loved one like? That's what runs through their heads over and over and over again. And regardless of whatever the specific cause of her death was, the way she died was not well. But the reality is, in all likelihood, she didn't have to have died at all. If Maxwell Anderson had been subject to the law, instead of being able to enjoy genetic immunity from that law, then most likely he'd already be in a cage and he wouldn't be harming anyone. Multiple violent crimes on his jacket, and the authorities were not at all in a hurry to see this guy thrown in a cage. And there's still the question of how many other victims Maxwell Anderson has. They could very easily have another Ted Bundy on their hands. But the white media is not sensationalizing this guy, nor are the white authorities making it a point to raise hell trying to get witnesses to come forward, or any other women who might have encountered this creep, or anyone who thinks that their friend or family member might have fallen victim to him. Even if it turns out that none of the names in his notebook are victims, even if it turns out the women's clothing that he had didn't belong to anyone, the truth is it would be foolish to assume that he hasn't killed anyone else. The only difference is their name wasn't Sade Robinson. And that's this week's Friday Crime Report. Keep your eyes open and stay on alert, because there's a lot worse criminals out there than the ones the white corporate media chooses to show you. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Mark Brown, Richard Griffith, Deborah Cooper, Cheryl Tate, and Leftravia Lawson. Salute to them, and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.